Welcome to Technology and Organisation. I'm Chris Barnett, and this video introduces the module taught around the world by Nottingham University Business School, but if you've come across this just by browsing the internet, I hope you'll find something interesting here as well. Now, in the Technology and Organisation module, we're going to study, as you would guess, lots of new technologies and how they will impact on business or may impact on business and their strategies and operation and all that type of thing. But the base of the module comes down to a single fundamental question, which I hope you can easily relate to. And that question is, what technologies will organisations use in the future and why? And I hope you can see that that's a reasonable question to ask, and any organisation might want to know the answer to that question. Well, to answer that question, in a lot of the module, across really sort of lectures about sort of 2 to 9, we're going to study individual technologies, the things themselves that might be changing. So things like 3D printing, synthetic biology, vertical farming, nanotechnology, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, robotics, and some of the things that might change ourselves in terms of medical technologies. So we can study those individual technologies and learn about what's going on from things which we know are in the lab now. So the things that will happen in the world of business in the next 5 to 10 years, those technologies already exist. Some pioneering organisations are using them. We can study that to see what will be in the mainstream in the years ahead. But to answer the question about what technologies will organisations use in the future and why, in addition to studying individual technologies, we can study things at a broader level. We can, for example, study global challenges. In other words, we can say, well, technologies are often invented or deployed in response to a particular challenge, and therefore in the first lecture, and indeed a little bit I suppose here, we'll talk a bit about those challenges. So things like energy supply, peak oil, what's going to happen with oil supply in the future, things like climate change, food supply, resource supplies more generally. These things will limit what people can do unless we develop new technologies to deal with them. So they will impact on our choices and our use of technology, what organisations do with them. We can also study what we'll call here macro trends, macro technological trends. In other words, not individual technologies themselves, but trends we can see over time that have occurred as new technologies have been brought into business. And if you can learn to identify those trends, that's really powerful, because it means over time, when the particular technologies we'll study here are sort of waxed and waned, you'll be aware of what will happen with the next wave. You can see patterns across time. That's a big bit of how the module works. I'll come back to those in a minute. We could also think about what technologies organisations will use in the future and why, linked to entrepreneurship. One of the great things about Nottingham University Business School is that all the undergraduates in the school study entrepreneurship at least once in their degree. You've all done that now. So you should all be the sort of people who will look at new technologies, as we'll study here, and you'll go, oh, that'll spark an opportunity. If we take that and we apply it to this, that creates a new thing we can do in business. And indeed, a lot of opportunities these days come from business people spotting opportunities with technologies, and particularly to say, well, that in this sector could affect that in this sector, and new ideas come from that. So I'm not going to teach entrepreneurship in this module, but I'm relying on the fact that you've already thought about these sort of things, so when you look at individual technologies, things will come out. So we're here studying the technologies themselves. We're studying global challenges that might force us to actually use technologies. We're studying broader ideas which have got some validity over time in terms of technological change, thinking about what entrepreneurs do, and that'll lead us to have some sort of view on those technologies that organisations will choose to promote and deploy in the future. Now, as I've sort of implied there, what I really want to focus on in this introduction is the idea we can study technologies on 2 levels. We can study technologies on what you might call a micro level, the individual technologies themselves. So 20 years ago, people wanted to know about the internet. So they could study the internet, how does it work, what does it do, that type of thing. And the same way, we can study today things like 3D printing, synthetic biology, AI, robotics, stuff like that, and we will. And you don't have to become a scientist or an engineer to understand that stuff. You need to understand these technologies and their implication the same way you understand the internet and its technologies and their implication. In lots of the modules you do, you will have the internet sitting there as a big thing behind everything in use in marketing or strategy or operations or whatever it is. And you're not being asked to understand the technicalities of the computing behind that, but the implication of that technology is fundamental to your study of many subjects today. And what we're really doing in this module is say, what are the next ones that you'll need to understand? And I can tell you, because I work with a lot of industrial clients, that the things we're studying are being talked about in the boardroom of big companies. I've been talking about them to companies in their boardroom very recently. I know that goes on. And I also know that some of the big companies where you're like to work as a graduate when you leave, if you go into a big graduate training scheme, they also talk about these things in those graduate training schemes. Again, I know because I actually input to some of those schemes. So we're looking at stuff which is very relevant to the world today in terms of those technologies. But as I said a few minutes back, we also in this module will look at things on a macro level. Now, micro and macro here doesn't mean the same thing as it does in economics. This is about a level of analysis in terms of individual technologies versus broader themes. And we've got in the module 4 themes. 4 things that will come back again and again and again. So the key thing you must take from this video and from material in lecture 1, and this material is critical to the rest of the module, is what these 4 themes are. And you can get them in your head relatively easy. They're quite straightforward things, very simple to define in some respects, but they have big implications. So let's see what those themes are. Our first macro theme is convergence, which is the idea of boundary loss. The idea that things used to be very distinct and those things become less distinct over time. They blur together. Doesn't mean they become the same, but they lose their boundary. So we've seen that with technologies over the years. It used to be that if you had a camera, you had film inside it, and if you, I don't know, try to write a letter neatly, you'd have a typewriter with bits of metal and stuff. Now you'd actually take pictures with a digital device, and you'd probably write a letter on a computer and print it out, or maybe even send it by email. So they'd be using digital technology. So what you do in those areas, cameras and letter writing devices, let's call them that, have become more similar. And this idea that technology is breaking down boundaries between technology applications, between industries, between marketplaces, has been talked about for years and years and years. There's a very famous diagram drawn, you can see it here, by a guy called Nicholas Negroponte in the 1980s. And he suggested at the time, back in the early 1980s, we had distinct sectors in terms of computing, in terms of telecommunications, in terms of the broadcasting and or media industries. And those industries, he suggested, had a little bit of overlap in 1980 and would have a lot of overlap by 2000 because of their common use of digital technology. And that, of course, with hindsight, was a very accurate prediction. And what we're going to do in this module is think about the next level of convergence around that. And convergence can be on all sorts of levels. It could be around skill sets. It could be home and work become the same. But particularly we'll talk about the new industrial convergence, as you're seeing in this diagram here. The idea of what is going on in manufacturing, making physical products, be that making washing machines or cars or iPhones or even food. What's going on there is starting to get similarities to what's going on in medicine and what's going on in the broader media sector, which is all those other sectors we just talked about, computing and comms and content all merged. So the idea that people and industries are starting to use the same sort of ideas, the same paradigms, the same concepts on the same sort of scale. That's the fundamentals of that type of convergence. And so by the end of the module, you should be able to look at this diagram, you should be able to understand and explain to quite a higher level of detail why those circles are coming together, why we're seeing blurring between industries and parts of industries, and how it is being driven by individual technologies like the ones you can see in the middle of the diagram. So that's our first theme, convergence. Our second theme is technological determinism. Now, this is an interesting one. This is a chicken and egg thing. If you believe in technological determinism, you believe that technology, through its existence, through its invention, can change the world. So people have often said things like, the internet changed the world. Smartphones have changed the world. And it almost feels right, that, doesn't it? We know that the way we live today, the way your generation has always lived, is very different to people 20 or 30 years ago because of our access to the internet and digital information. We can buy things online, we socialise online. The way people spend their time is very different. We can click and connect in the way we couldn't previously. So the idea that the internet's changed the world is a nice idea. It seems obvious, doesn't it? However, you could also reasonably say, well, technology is not a social actor. Technology doesn't get up in the morning and say, hey, I'm technology, I'm going to change the world. You could argue the world is changed by people using technology. It's actually determined in terms of its changes by social forces, cultural forces, economic forces, business forces. So the technological determinism debate is around, does technology change the world through its existence, or do people change the world with technology? As I said, that's a chicken and egg. It is an academic debate, but it's also critically important to businesses. Because if you're a business and you believe that technology can create change through its own existence, like I'm going to say the internet did, that's a technologically determinist statement, but if you believe that, then you have to make sure you understand which technologies are deterministic at which point in time and do something about them. You know, if you were like one of the companies in the early sort of 1990s, maybe a bit later than that, who said, oh, internet, that's a fad, it's never going to have a big impact on business, you were in trouble probably 5 years later if you were still in business. So today, in the module we're looking at technologies, as I've mentioned already, AI, robotics, 3D printing and big ones right now. Are they going to cause fundamental change in our economy, fundamentally change industries? If they are, that's deterministic. We need to understand that. So businesses care about this chicken and egg question. They might not call it technological determinism, but they certainly care about which technologies may be about to cause fundamental change at which point in time. So that's another one of our big themes. Our third theme closely links to that, which is the idea that across history we've seen repeating cycles of techno-economic revolution. An idea very well highlighted by a researcher called Carlota Perez, and you can read, hopefully you will read the article, the first chapter of her book, which is an article about this. They're available to read on the reading list. And what she basically says is across history, we've had cycles of economic activity, of boom and bust in the stock market based around a new technology. That happened when the canals were built. Lots of money went into build the canals in the UK, in the Industrial Revolution, and opened up communications, but the people who built the canals went out of business. Same thing happened to the people who built the railways. A lot of money went in to build these new means of communication, allowing people to communicate as never before, changing the nature of business and trade. But the people who built the railways put so much money in, they all went out of business at the end of it, by and large. And the same happened to a large extent in the United States. However, the people who put in canals, the people who put in railways, left a legacy, they left an infrastructure that changed how business could function. And it can be argued, I think, very, very powerfully that the same thing happened with the dot-com boom and bust around the late 90s, early noughties, where many of the firms who were actually part of the dot-com rise didn't survive it, but the companies who came out at the end said, thanks very much for all the infrastructure you put in place. So very much on a similar basis to studying technological determinism, and all of our big four themes linked together, it's interesting to sort of try and work out what will be the next big thing. What will be the thing that causes this next cycle of a techno-economic revolution, boom and bust, based around the technology that will have a fundamental impact on business. Our final theme is broader than that. Our final theme is about the singularity. Singularity is a difficult concept. Singularity is something it takes a while to get your head around to really understand. And like many things on the module, particularly these four themes, you will not easily understand them all if you try and learn them in the last few days before the exam. It's great we teach technology organisation in semester 2 because it gives you all that time from the end of January into May to think about these things, let them go around in your head and so you can understand what's going on. So anyway, the singularity is the idea we're approaching a point in time of extreme technological possibility where the impossible becomes possible, if you like. The actual term of singularity refers, at least in physics, to the edge of a black hole, the event horizon of a black hole. Black holes in space suck in light, suck in everything. You can't see beyond the event horizon of a black hole. It's utterly pitch black. Even light can't escape. And so the idea is we're heading towards this point in time out there somewhere beyond which we can't see, because we cannot imagine, using our current existing human brains, what could possibly be possible beyond that point in time. So it's a point in time where we've learned to master control of matter itself. We've learned in the past few decades to control information and communicate information. But as we'll talk about in the module, we might be heading towards technologies that can control matter, microfabricators rather than microprocessors. processors so that we can turn waste into new products and create new forms of energy, and all of our problems go away because of technology. That may or may not be true, of course, but if it is true, this could occur maybe in the next sort of 20, 30, 40 years, certainly in your working lifetimes. And in particular today, often people associate the idea of a singularity, this point in time of exponential technological progress where the impossible becomes possible. They associate that with artificial intelligence, the creation of beyond human intelligence that allows us to do all these amazing things that will happen when all these technologies come together. And partially the singularity links back into convergence, because convergence, if technologies come together, if industries come together, if skills and knowledge come together, then every advancement in one field advances other fields, because suddenly you get payback from every bit of progress. You know, think about, say, Human Genome Project. When they mapped the human genome to understand, at least start to understand our DNA, the thing that really pushed that project forward wasn't advanced in medicine, it was advanced in computing that led it to be finished before they thought, because computing power became available to help them with the process. One area pushed on another one. That's what the singularity is about. So those are our four big themes: convergence, loss of boundaries, the idea of technological determinism. Does technology change the world, or does the world change technology effectively? Repeating cycles of techno-economic revolution. Can we see the next one coming along? And are we heading towards the singularity? I've highlighted them here. I'll highlight them in lecture 1, or you will have seen me highlight them in lecture 1, and they'll be highlighted in lecture 10. At the end of the module, it all sort of fits together. But across every lecture in the middle, when we look at technologies on a more micro level, you should always be thinking in what you're seeing in a lecture, in what you read, in what you discuss with each other. I hope you'll do that, in what you see in video. How do these particular examples and technologies fit with those themes? Are they deterministic technologies? Are they going to drive convergences on different levels? Are they going to lead to the next cycle of change? Will they take us towards the singularity? So that's what we're studying in this module, and I hope nothing else I've signalled here why what's in lecture 1 and lecture 10 is so critical. I know people love to question spot and pick particular topics out to do their exam questions, and I try to set exam questions that avoid that as much as I can, but people still do it, and often successfully. But do not ignore what's at the start and the end of the module. Just a few final things to say in terms of housekeeping and keeping you doing well with things. You should have, I would hope, one of these, which is a module pack. This is the UK pack. You'll obviously have maybe a different pack if you're in the Malaysia campus or the China campus. But this gives you, in terms of the UK pack here, everything I'm going to hand out in the lectures. You've got at the front the module outline with all the module outline stuff, and by page 3 it's stuff you actually want to know. The reading list all here. There's a lot of reading listed here. You don't have to read all of this. You'll see for every topic there are things bolded in which are the key things to look at. But if you are going to look at a topic in more depth and pick it as one you particularly like, obviously you would hopefully read more about the topic. Everything's on Moodle, or the links are on Moodle. Quite a lot of video as well as just things to read, so hopefully that'll keep you interested. You'll see in here also there is a task for the first tutorial, which hopefully you will do based around a YouTube playlist, all a video-based tutorial, much more fun than one when you have to read things. And after that, you will find the slides from the lectures. Not all the slides, some are held back to surprise you, some are held back for copyright reasons, but basically pretty much everything is in the pack. And I would highlight though, you're not expected to learn the pack. This is not the module. This is simply the stuff I will use to try and teach things to you. Hopefully will teach things to you. Do not try and just pick this thing, hold up and read it verbatim and learn it verbatim. This gives you a structure, absolutely, for the syllabus. But if you're trying to learn things maybe without the lectures, if you haven't maybe been to every lecture, like sometimes happens, I know, then you're much better to look at the reading and the reading list and things rather than trying to learn the pack itself. And to think about those broad themes, those macro themes, and to overlay them when you're reading particular topics. I'll mention the book. Down here it is, dropping things on the floor. We have a book called The Next Big Thing by, it's by me. There we are. It's got a picture of a spacecraft on the front. We aren't actually doing the space chapters in this book. This book looks at 3 big sets of changes across time, changes in manufacturing, 3D printing, synthetic biology, nanotech. We are looking at that. It looks towards artificial intelligence and robotics, and that's stuff we are looking at that. And it looks at changes in ourselves, transhumanism, or going towards humanity 2.0. If we develop technologies which can change the world in terms of manufacturing, organic technologies, we could change ourselves too. That has fundamental business implications. How do we keep up with the machines? You know, you're going to be competing in your lives with fellow employees and artificial intelligence and robots. You've always got to be asking when you're trying to get a job, why should they employ me rather than AI? Because in 10 years, that's going to really, really matter. And therefore, one of the ways we might keep up with that stuff is by altering ourselves, which is a weird idea, but again, it's in the book. The stuff on space travel in the middle, you don't have to read that. It is the next big thing perhaps beyond all that, but if you want to use that material, absolutely fine. Having said all that, you can study the module perfectly well, ignoring this entirely, simply by reading all the articles and things around stuff. But if you want things pretty much all in one place, you'll find it in that book. Other than that, the final thing I'd say is to do well in this module, you really should build up your own set of cases and examples. We're going to look at new technologies. We're going to look at themes around those technologies. But to write good exam answers, you want to be able to say, this company is doing that. This company developed this technology. This company applied this technology. Today, they're a pioneer. What can we learn from what they've done? And a good example in the exam is not just the name of a company. It's a bit of detail of what they've done. So in the reading, you will find lots of examples. In the videos we've got on the list, in the tutorials, you'll find lots of examples. In the videos that are played in the lectures, you'll find lots of examples. In the book, there are examples. But there are also examples on supplier websites, because companies developing new technologies, cloud computing, AI, 3D printing, whatever, they have to explain to their potential customers not just what they actually offer, but why they want it. So they put lots of good case studies up. And so I'll be pointing out all the way through the module, and of course they're listed in the pack as well, places you can go online to look around cases to get good information to make your answers better. And often you can use these cases across lots of different topics. So if you want what is the thing I do in this module to make it really successful for me in terms of doing well? Yes, it's obviously studying the module and reading some of the stuff in the reading and this sort of thing, and attending the lectures and talking to people about it, thinking about the ideas, sharing ideas, building up your own set of cases. So when I say in the lecture, this company's got some great case studies on its website, my expectation is if you want to do well, you will go to that site and have a look. And sometimes you have to search around a bit and you'll have to think about it, and it's not laid out like a textbook or a journal article. You've got to actually do a bit of moving around. But hopefully it means you can pick things of interest to you. And in previous years, people have focused on everything from fashion to Formula One to dog training, all sorts of stuff, because they've been interested in the topic, they've used the supplier sites, they've got examples that they're interested in. If you're interested in it, you'll learn it better, remember it, you'll do well. So, that's my introduction to technology and organisation. I hope you all do very well wherever you're studying this module all around the world, and I'll leave it there, and if you're in the UK, I will see you in the lecture theatre again very soon.